Hello everybody and welcome back to the Halo Chronicle. Today's video is Lucky Part 13 in my Fall of the Forerunners series. As always, if you have not seen the previous parts, I highly recommend you go check those out first before watching today's video. Links will be provided in the description below. In last week's episode, we would discuss the final preparations that the Forerunners would need to make before releasing the destructive power of the Halo Array. The librarian would venture to the Shield World Requiem to confront her husband for composing all of her human specimens on the Omega Halo. With the help of one of his commanders, the librarian immobilizes and incapacitates the Didact. He would then be sealed away in his cryptum. This would protect any species from the Didact's wrath after the reseeding of the galaxy following the activation of the array. She would then make her way to Erde Tyrene, where her senior life worker Chantagreen was waiting with several populations of humans she collected. The librarian would pass her Life Shaper title to Chant and order her to go to the Lesser Ark to save as much of humanity as she could. The librarian would then turn her focus on building a portal on Erde Tyrene that could take humanity to the Ark so that they could claim the mantle. Bornstellar and Monitor Chakas would then arrive at the Lesser Ark and begin preparations to distribute the Halo Array. Now that we're all caught up on last week's episode, let's jump into today's episode. Upon receiving the ship she requested from Bornstellar, the librarian would begin the process of building and hiding the Great Portal on Erde Tyrene. To buy Bornstellar more time, the librarian would send a message to all Forerunner vessels, even those controlled by the Flood. This message would state that the Forerunners finally found a cure for the Flood and were assembling the final components on Erde Tyrene. She hoped that this message would draw the Flood to Erde Tyrene and give Bornstellar the time he needed to activate the array. Bornstellar would assume control of the Lesser Ark. All life workers on the installation were instructed to assist Bornstellar with whatever he needed. The final task before the halos could be dispersed would be the assignment of the activation indexes. Each installation would receive a monitor to act as a caretaker and safeguard the installation. Monitor Chakas was selected to be the caretaker of Installation 04, also known as Alpha Halo. Halos were given an alpha numerical delineation based on their firing order. Alpha Halo would be the first to fire upon activation. Each monitor that was put in charge of these installations would be given a new designation. This designation would act as an epitaph for the Forerunners. Monitor Chakas' new designation would be 343 Guilty Spark. The monitor was given new programming to assist him in his new role. Little did 343 Guilty Spark know, this new programming would erase all of its memories of being a human once the halos were fired. This was done for the sake of compartmentalization. Bornstellar and 343 Guilty Spark would end their time together with one final question. Bornstellar would ask 343 Guilty Spark that if it were his decision, would he fire the Halo Array. After the activation indexes were dispersed and 343 Guilty Spark was sent to Installation 04, Bornstellar would be greeted by another familiar ancilla. Offensive Bias arrived on the Lesser Ark. It would bring with it 400 Forerunner vessels. This impressed Bornstellar as he did not expect the ancilla to survive, nonetheless save Forerunner ships from the destruction at the Greater Ark. Offensive Bias would state that it had received a coded message from Mendicant Bias. Mendicant Bias offered Offensive Bias the chance to join with it and help destroy the remaining Forerunners. Offensive Bias refused and took its forces back to the Lesser Ark. Offensive Bias reported that time and space around the Lesser Ark was starting to mutate and it believed that the Flood would be arriving soon. Offensive Bias stated that it would use all of the resources at its disposal to stall the Flood's incursion. Mendicant Bias's Flood-infested fleet would outnumber Offensive Bias's 436 to 1. Bornstellar would then waste no more time. He would activate the Lesser Ark's portal and distribute the 6 Neoterra Halo installations across the galaxy. Back on Erde Tyrene, the librarian would continue to oversee the construction of this great portal. Precursor structures began to fill the sky. While waiting for the halos to be fired, she would be greeted by an unlikely presence. Porthencio, the Lord of Admirals and leader of the ancient humans, appeared in the African savannah. This surprised the librarian, as Forthencho had been dead for over 10,000 years. The Gravemind used the composer to imprint Forthencho's image, patterns, and memories onto decaying flood tissue. This being would not live long, but it would survive long enough to deliver a message. Forthencho would advise the librarian that when the halos were fired, all of Forerunner knowledge and history stored in the domain would be lost forever. He would reveal that the construct that encases the domain is built using neurophysical architecture. It too would be destroyed by the halo radiation. This means that the Didact will have nothing but his madness to keep him company for however long he would remain in his cryptum. His mind would never be healed. He would never return to how he was before. This saddened her greatly. She believed that the Forerunners were about to destroy their own soul with the destruction of the domain. She attempted to send a message to Bornsteller warning him about this terrible side effect, but it was too late. After dispersing the halos, the defense line surrounding the Lesser Ark was compromised. Mendicant Bias and his flood-infested fleet began moving in. Immediately, Offensive Bias began defensive operations in an attempt to stall for time. Bornsteller, seeing this, knew that there was no time left to lose. After a few moments of saying Forerunner prayers, Bornsteller would mutter one final phrase, "Forgive us." He would then press the activation plate. Within an instant, all of the halos were fired, starting with Installation 04, aka Alpha Halo, and ending with Installation 07, aka Zeta Halo. The halo radiation would pierce through the galaxy. The faster-than-light halo radiation would cleanse the galaxy of all intelligent life. The destruction of all life in the galaxy would include all of the flood residues piloting Mendicant Bias's fleet. Mendicant Bias would lose control of most of its fleet. This allowed Offensive Bias to gain control, and through a series of kamikaze attacks, the battle would come to a quick and decisive end. Through overwhelming odds, Offensive Bias defeated and captured Mendicant Bias, ending its reign of destruction and terror. The librarian would also succumb to the halo's deadly radiation. She would pass on Erde Tyrene. She did everything she could to protect her specimens and safeguard the future of the galaxy. Her portal would be completed several hundred years later. It would then be buried and locked away until the galaxy's new caretakers would assume their birthright. The Forerunners finally ended this devastating war, but it cost them everything. The Forerunner Ecumene, which once encompassed 3 million worlds, was no more, and only a very small group of Forerunners remained. That is going to complete today's chapter of this story. Before I leave you, let's talk about some interesting facts related to today's video. For a long time, there has been a misconception about the way the Halo installations fire. Many assume they all fire at once, but that is not the case. When the first Halo is fired, the next one does not fire until the radiation from the previous one reaches it. In this way, Halo fields of radiation actually overlap each other. The next interesting fact is about the librarian's last message to Bornsteller. The message would actually go unread for over 300 years. This is because the librarian passed her title of Life Shaper to Chantagreen, causing her signature to change. This made Bornsteller think that the message was a fake sent by the Flood. Couple that with his grief from her passing, and the message would nearly be forgotten. Our last interesting fact of the day comes from 343 Guilty Spark. As the halos were being fired, 343 Guilty Spark would intercept communications from a new species that was just finding its voice. Due to its emergence in this desperate time, it is unlikely that this species was cataloged by the life workers. There are likely thousands if not millions of species that would be eliminated by the halo's effects. The life workers only had about 1,000 years to preserve specimens. Due to this time constraint, there was no way to catalog everything. Thanks for watching today's video. If you liked this video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more content. Also, if you are subscribed, don't forget to turn on notifications so that you are alerted to the next video. Part 14 will be released next week and will detail the reseeding of the galaxy after the activation of the array. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.